Welcome back to our system design series. In this episode, we are diving into the domain name system, DNS. Domain name system is a fundamental building block of the internet. By the end of this video, you will understand what DNS is, how it works, and why it's so important for connecting users to websites around the world. So let's start into it. First, let's say that we have a client here, and the client needs to send request to a server. And the client has its own machine and the server has its own machine, and machines are connecting with each other using IP address. So if the client wanted to use the server, it has to have the IP address of the server. But when you go to the internet, you didn't type the IP address over Facebook servers to access Facebook. You do something different. You type just facebook.com. And this is what we call a domain name. And this is where a domain name system comes into play. So basically, instead of the client just send the IP address, which is not easy to be remembered, it differently. Let's just try to do it here. Okay. It will send the domain name to a domain name system, and the domain name system will send back the IP address that hold that domain name. IP. Oh, okay. Sometimes Miro does a lot of stupid stuff, to be honest. Yeah, exactly. IP address. So the domain name system will send back the IP address to the client, and once the IP address is obtained, the client will try to send the request to the server with its IP address. So think of the DNS as a phone book of the internet. When you type a website name like example.com or facebook.com or youtube.com into your browser, DNS is what helps translate that human readable name into an IP address that computer can understand. This process is essential because while we remember names, computers talk to each other using numbers. So let's try to answer the question. Okay, what is a DNS? The domain name system is a distributed database that translates domain names like google.com into IP addresses. Every device connected to the internet has a unique IP address, but remembering those addresses is not particular for humans, or basically DNS bridges that gap, making it possible for us to access websites without having to memorize long string of numbers. So an example for that, if you type, let's say let's put the text like that. If you type www.example.com, what will happen here in your browser? The DNS will resolve that into an IP address such as 192, let's say .0.2.1, for example, like that. And your computer will use that IP address to connect to the correct server. Okay, so I guess we need right now to talk about how does it works. And it works in 5 steps. First, we have DNS query. And when you enter a domain name in your browser, a DNS query is sent out to find the corresponding IP address. The second thing will be the recursive resolver. Let me make this quite wider. The second thing would be the recursive resolver. This is a first stop for your DNS query. The recursive resolver acts as a middleman connecting other DNS servers on your behalf to find the IP address. And there is a root server. So the recursive resolver then contacts a root server, which directs the query to the correct top level domain server. For example, the .com server for .com domain, for example, and there is fourth TLD server. So the TLD server then points to the authoritative name server for the specific domain you're trying to reach. And lastly, we have the authoritative name server. The authoritative name server, finally, the authoritative name server provides the IP address for the domain, and recursive resolver sends it back to your browser, allowing it to connect to the correct server. So it might seem like a lot of steps, but this whole process happens in milliseconds, making the internet experience seamless for users. There are multiple types of record. There is EA record and 4A records for IP version 6. There are C name record, which is and there is also CNAME record, and there is MX record. But I guess this goes beyond our focus on the on this video, because we are just trying to understand what is a domain name system on high level, because this is in context of system design interview. You just need to understand how domain name system works on high level. So let's say that, so to summarize, DNS is like a phone book of the internet, translating domain names into IP addresses that computers can understand. It works through a series of hierarchical steps to resolve domain names, and it relies on various types of DNS records to perform its job effectively. Without DNS, the internet as we know it simply won't be accessible or reliable. So that's it for this video, and see you in the future.